Good morning, everybody. Well, morning my time at least. Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and we're here with the usual Saturday live stream. I looked over the new watch releases for the last week, and I decided, let's do a broad topic again, like we do from time to time. So this time, it's going to sound like a topic that's not going to resonate very well with a lot of you who would probably watch because you all are already watch enthusiasts and watch collectors. But today's topic is going to be around the idea of 5 watch brands that are great for beginners. They're great for anyone, in my opinion. However, I do think in particular, they work out very well as suggestions for beginners who want to get into the hobby. So we will get into that in the kind of the logic that I'll use as my framework here in a moment. But of course, going to do my usual housekeeping stuff. No videos to discuss over the last week. I didn't shoot any pre-recorded stuff. In fact, this was planned to be a pre-recorded video. And then when I didn't see anything else I wanted to talk about, I was like, let's just make it a live chat. And then we can get other suggestions from you all about what brands you guys like to recommend to new collectors. On the wrist today, well, not on the wrist right now, but is my Baltic Aquascaf. This is the bronze brown. Nothing focuses right anymore. There we go. There you get a good little sense of it. So very rainy out here today. I don't expect to spend a ton of time outside, but I do typically walk to pick up lunch. So I figured I would wear this. It's been a few weeks since I put it on anyway. So, and then my shirt today is one of my Watches with Dennis shirts. I do have a few of those, and this is timely, but not this shirt. This is one that makes fun of authorized dealers. That's in the shop that I have, which is linked on the channel somewhere. But the reason why I'm bringing it up is it gives me a good little segue. I meant to talk about this last Saturday when I saw it, but I forgot to, with everything else I was doing. So I wanted to go ahead and just touch on it in the intro today. And that is, I have a link in the video description to this if you want to read it, but there's a Grinding Gears editorial piece in a blog to watch that came out back on the 5th of May. And it goes over the effects of, like consumers and they don't really care about watchmaking in and of itself. But the thing that caught my eye about this is the cover picture. Do you recognize this picture? Those of you who have watched the channel for a while might know this photo because this is from my favorite ad campaign that has ever happened for Audemars Piguet for sure. But I think just in general, I would say this is my favorite ad campaign in watches. I won't say it's my favorite ad campaign overall. I still have to give a tip of the hat to the Old Spice ads with the tickets becoming diamonds. That was a brilliant ad campaign. But for ridiculousness, this is my favorite. And as you go through the article with a blog to watch, it has my favorite photo from the ad campaign, the dead girl in a lawn chair. And I missed this editorial. I don't usually read the editorials. I didn't know it came out. I actually saw an uptick in lawn chair watch sales, shirt sales. So again, and I do have a direct link in the video description for this one now, so you don't have to hunt for it. But for quite a while now, since this ad campaign, my sister actually did the design for this, of these shirts with honoring, celebrating, codifying into the annals of watch history, the dead girl in a lawn chair in a form of a shirt. It's my best-selling shirt by far. I think this is better selling than any of my pinball shirts, at least the ones that I put out for the Eclectic Gamers podcast. So best shirt campaign I ever had. And it's all thanks to Audemars Piguet and this ridiculous way to sell watches. Anyway, this editorial came out and I saw they had the pictures. I was like, I'm not the only one. I knew I wasn't the only one because y'all have bought shirts, but I was just so happy. I love that ad campaign. I want AP to do something worse at some point, but I don't know if they're capable of doing that. But anyway, I just wanted to point that out. I meant to talk about it last week, but just got too busy talking about other stuff instead. So let me say hello to the chat, and then we will jump into the logic that I'm using for the brands. I have 5 that we'll be going over, but I want to hang my hat on why I chose the 5 that I chose. So Thomas with the Escapement Show, good morning. Hope you are having a really good weekend. Arthur, no, you're not late. You've arrived exactly when you needed to. And so hello to you. Rob, thank you for being a 99-cent club member. I do appreciate it. I think Rob actually has one of those dead girl lawn chair shirts. Yes, he does. Apparently he has a couple of them. No, the latest sales that I last saw, I think went to Belgium. And I was just like, I don't know how many, what do we call people from Belgium? Are they, I don't want to say Belgies if it's insulting. I don't know what I guess Belgians. I guess I should have known. So anyway, I don't know how many Belgians actually watch the show. And that's when I ended up running into that article, and I was like, I wonder if they did I don't know if they did a search. I think there was someone in the comment section of that A Blog to Watch article that mentioned that there was the shirt available. So I wonder if that is what is what triggered the sale. But anyway, nonetheless, it was interesting. Hello, Tuna. Thank you also for being a 99-cent club member, underachieving watch collector. Glad you were able to join us. Okay, here we go. 5 brands that I think are great recommendations for beginners. Now, it gets really delicate. I'm sure you've all run into this if you've had anyone ever ask you about a watch. I actually get a lot of those questions now. Actually, from again, as you can see on the back wall, from the pinball side, I have people message me on pinball forums, usually I'd say once a quarter or so, asking me what the like they're usually exploring a watch. Maybe they're exploring a watch for a friend or a partner, or they're wanting to get a watch themselves, and they have a million questions about what they should do, or if this is a good deal, or all of that. So when new people are coming into watches, and they're really wanting to approach it from a hobby perspective, like they're just interested in watches in general, maybe they're interested in mechanical watches in particular, because a lot of hobbies, one of the unifying things, especially hobbies that are dominated by men, I've found, often there's some aspect to it about, kind of falls into 2 camps in my mind. There's like the creation side, the people who are into woodworking, making flies for fly fishing, stuff like that. And then there's the mechanical operational side. That's what pinball is. It's like, how does this with circuitry, electronics, reels, and leaf switches do what it does? And mechanical watches fall into that space. And quartz watches kind of walk this line because there's still mechanical aspects to it, just like digital, I should say, electronic pinball versus electromechanical pinball from the past. So anyway, not to belabor the point, but there's a reason why people kind of gravitate to these particular things, and it's not just that they look nice. So anyway, given that, my general rules of thumb with people is I need brands that offer a decent selection at under $1,000. I think asking people to spend 4 figures on a watch, especially if it's the first time they're diving into something, doesn't make a lot of sense. A lot of people are going to be uncomfortable financially doing that. Not to mention, if they're wearing multiple watches, it adds up quick. So it's easier if the watches are just a few $100s for them to be able to explore and play around with what they might want to do. Now, most brands, of course, you can get the watch cheaper than when it lists on the website, but I start with a website perspective because that's usually where people will go. They'll probably go to the Seiko website first, not Chrono24 or whatever. Also, beginner collectors typically are afraid. I think that's a fair word. Are afraid of used. They are afraid of getting a fake. Even if it's a low value watch, there's still that perception that they might get a fake. They're afraid that they might buy something used that's actually not working right, which is a real concern. You don't know. And more affordable watches are generally not sold by third-party dealers. They don't make enough profit margin on them to take the photos and clean them up and stuff. So you basically are doing private party transactions. So unless they know the person, a lot of times they're really, really uncomfortable. So there's that challenge as well. So I'm thinking you want to consider new, what the price is on the website. And the third piece that I used for my choices, and you all may have different recommendations, of course, is they need to be major brands, no micro brands. It's part of that. It's twofold. One, they might want to try the watches on. Most of these major brands, all of these major brands I'm going to name, you probably can find relatively easily around at a store or someplace to be able to give them a try. So I think that's really useful, especially for people who don't yet know like what the lug to lug the size they like is, what the thickness is, what the diameter is that they're comfortable wearing. So you solve that. Micro brands are very difficult to encounter in person. Some of them you just cannot until you buy them. And the second is again, while most micro brands are using a third-party movement and servicing actually isn't an issue, dealing with the brand if there's a break, mixed reaction. Again, some are good and some are not. It's just better to work with a big brand when you're a beginner. When you're a more experienced collector, I think micro brands are an excellent space to go and play in because you're gonna get a lot more creativity you can find a lot more creativity in the design side of it. But for starters, I wouldn't start there. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm approaching it. So go ahead and see a few more chat comments, and then we will start with the first brand. Thomas noting that it was a funny ad campaign. Yes, it was very, very confusing. Tuna, let me know about Belgium, is Flemish and Woloon, or yeah, I hope I said that right. Woloon. Flemish, I know. Not the language, of course. Ben says, "What's good, Dennis? How are you liking the Patek Philippe gondola?" I like it. I like the gondola. I'm not wearing it today. I'm wearing my Baltic Aquascaf because it's a rainy day and I'm going to be outside after this actually. And so I would, 30 meters water resistance is probably fine for getting caught in the rain, but I don't just go walking in the rain with it on. But yeah, I typically, now that I've done my honeymoon period, did the review on it, I tend to wear it weekly. It's sort of the pace it's currently at, and it's in my rotation with my other dress watches. Where would I rank it amongst all the dress watches I have? I'd put it just under the Longa 1, but I feel it wears better than the Breguet Classique I have. And it's more comfortable on the wrist also over the Colpatonda I have for Parmigiani. So I'd say overall, it's my second favorite dress watch that I've got, would be how I'd describe it. And I've already noted what I have. I have a Baltic Aquascaf on. Thomas says, I think Casio, Timex, Seiko, Citizen, etc. are obvious choices for very first watch. I agree. Those are all good listings. Some of those will appear in this list. Tuna says, Tissot and Hamilton can't really be beat for the money. Those might very well. So that's not like a big secret. The links are in the video description to the brand sites so that you can go and look at them. Ben says, my first watch to get me started was a Rolex Datejust. Mine actually was an Explorer 2. I mean, I had a Citizen before that I was gifted when I was in high school in the 90s. That was my first, what I call nice watch, adult watch. And then, but I got my Explorer 2 used like in the mid 2000s, and I wore that for over 15 years. So I didn't start where I think a lot of collectors start, but I wasn't a collector when I got that watch. I didn't start collecting until around 2020. So very different approach. Rob says, Orient makes some great watches for a reasonable price. Ben says, I have one Orient, but I have never worn it. I used to have one, and we'll get into that because that's actually going to be our first brand. And so let's go ahead and let me get you the screen share going. There you go. All right. So let's start with Orient, because this is the one I normally start with people, especially if they know they convey that they're on a relatively tight budget, but they want mechanical. And I'm like, okay, Orient is an excellent place to start because the catalog is littered with watches that with no discount are under $1,000 US. And you have a variety of design choices to pick from. You get in-house movements. And even though Seiko owns Orient, Orient's DNA is very different. Orient still uses their own developed movements. They don't use the Seiko movements. It's not a hand-me-down. And their design language is very different than what Seiko runs with. Now, I actually have 3 examples to go with, and it's kind of out of collections. I've tried to pick collections where you can find a decent amount of watches within those parameters of pricing. Now, my parameter isn't always going to be mechanical, but for Orient, it is. So the sport collection, I think, is where most people would start because dive watches are the most popular style of watch. A lot of collectors, be they beginners or advanced, often lean heavily on dive. I would say if we were to take a sampling of the people on the live stream right now, my guess would be if we added up all your different watches together, the plurality of watch design that is the most owned would be dive style. And so the Komatsu, this isn't just the Komatsu collection. I had a Kano. The Kanos wear bigger. I would have probably been better off with a Komatsu, so I sold my Kano. But the Kano was a nice watch. It was easy to regulate. I regulated it myself. It was within spec, though. I just wanted it to be even more accurate, and it's not very hard to regulate the movements that Orient uses. But you get a day-date complication. You get dive capability, good water resistance. A number of these actually come with sapphire crystals, at least the Komatsus do. The Kanos are more of a mixed bag. But again, you can see on the pricing, this is all stuff easily available right now for under $400, and that's on bracelet. So now, Orient's bracelets aren't great, in my opinion, in my experience. However, they're easy to size. They use the cotter pin approach rather than pin and collar. So if you want to get started adjusting your own bracelets, they're definitely worse brands to start with than Orient. And if you like the look of a bracelet, hey, you get one. And if you want a better one, you can always buy a third-party one later if that's your interest. But again, they've got fun colors, they've got conservative colors. So in terms of a collection, this is generally, if someone says they want a mechanical sports watch, I start with Orient with them. If they're brand new to watches, I say, go ahead and take a look at those. And I usually recommend the Komatsu because the sizing is best for most wrists. And it gives them you get the sapphire. You don't have to shop around. You don't have to question if you're comfortable with mineral crystal. It solves a lot of that. So there's that one. Another collection that I'm not personally into aesthetically, but if people are wanting something kind of dressy but interesting, I'm going to do my air quotes, interesting, dressy, then the classic collection. You have, odder layouts, you have open hearts, you have, Roman numerals start to come into play. Again, they look pretty dressy. They come on leather straps, but you can also get them on bracelets. Again, pricing's really, really good. A lot of these things are floating around between $300 and $500, all sorts of different colorways and such. And so some of these are mechanical. I'm not sure if they all are. But again, if you want that stock kind of more dressy, Datejust-esque, let's call it like that. Those go anywhere, do anything style watches. You're not looking for a dive. There are a lot of really good choices here. You got some chronographs, of course, that are still within reasonable pricing, but which I'm sure if I were to look, I have not looked into these chronos, but I'm sure they've got to be powered by quartz, and they are, given the price point. But you've got stuff like the Symphony 3, which look like, their version of a Datejust. So really, really clean looks. Not my cup of tea personally, but again, if that's something where someone's like, well, I'm not really interested in a dive watch, but I don't want something super minimalist, this is a good collection to point people towards, in my opinion. And then, of course, the Orient Bambino. I never recommend the Bambino as a general rule because everyone recommends the Bambino when someone says, hey, I want to get a dress watch, but I don't want to spend a lot of money. But there's a reason for it. One, they're super cheap. Again, you can see it on their site right now. These are readily available under $300. And you get those very, very simple dial designs. Again, actually, I like the look of the Bambino in general. I wish it was without a date because I don't like the date window integration. But bang for buck, it is very difficult to beat this, especially if, let's say, you just want something that you were only going to occasionally wear and you really like the budgetary limit is very much what's driving you. But they're you see, we're on their Bambino version 7s now. There are older Bambinos. Again, with beginners, I don't point them to used watches, but you have stuff with small seconds. You have stuff with the the Roman numerals. You have stuff with just baton indices. So there's a lot of choice here, and you can see the pricing wise, like almost all of these models are under $400 US. So these all are designed to be on straps. So they're dressier than the classic series, but I see they do have some on mesh. Okay. Well, I didn't even remember that they had ones on mesh. Okay. They have a few mesh ones too, if you're more interested in that. And again, the pricing remains low. So overall, Orient is generally one I tend to start with beginners in particular. It's a little bit more obscure. Again, it's a mainstream brand, but it's more obscure in the sense that Seiko's better known, Casio's better known. Orient feels a little more off the beaten path. You don't tend to encounter people wearing Orient watches unless you go to watch functions and stuff. So I just think it's a really good place for you to direct beginners. Or if you are a beginner watching, I would say definitely take a look at them, especially at that price range. They're very, very competitive at that price range. Tuna says, I have the Orient Sun and Moon. Never wear the thing, but that is one chunk of a watch. Yes. And unfortunately, we can find thinner watches in affordability. We tend to have to lean quartz because that can really slim things up. And there are some very, very good options there. I would say the biggest issue we run into in the more budget range is when we start getting really complicated with watches. As you noted, Sun and Moon, I'm sure it had a complication with it. And so the modular approach that tends to happen with those complication watches add thickness to it. And eventually we end up a lot of times getting thicker than maybe what we would ideally want to see. But of course, it depends. Some people really enjoy wearing very thick watches. I am not one of those people, but there are people out there that are perfectly comfortable with it. Or some of them actually actively want thick watches. They don't like the sense that the watch isn't on the wrist. It bothers them. Ben 10 says, yes, I remember seeing it and not pulling the trigger. Kind of wish I did now. I think this is a discussion about Thomas's Tudor P01, a very interesting design. Not in the list today, Tudor, a little too high on a price point for me to steer beginners to Tudor. Arthur says, I bought about 25 watches, but only ever bought one dive watch. Gilt Tudor Black Bay 58. I just don't think I need another because it's just so good. Perhaps a no date sub. I mean, Arthur, I'm in a similar boat. This Aquascaf is my only date just in the collection. I'm still on the wait list for a no date Rolex sub, and I figured if I got it, I might just sell. My inclination was to sell this off because I'm not sure I would wear it. That being said, this watch was under $1,000. It's not like it's going to command a lot of money to get rid of. And it is my only bronze watch as well. So I might actually keep this. This is the same basic formulation of bronze that Tudor does on their bronze watches, which I had a Tudor Black Bay bronze at one stage, but not the 58, the original. Well, not the original. The original was a brown dial. I had a black dial one, but the huge one, the 43 millimeter with like almost a 53 millimeter lug to lug. I'll tell you, it didn't overhang, but I can't tell you how much bigger we could have possibly gotten without it overhanging. So at one point, I had, I think, 4 dive watches. It's never been the majority of my collection either, but I've had more than what I'm currently at this stage. So let's say you're not into dive watches, because there are plenty of people that aren't, and you want to do something. Let's say you're into integrated watches. How could we not go to Tissot? So Tissot has more than integrated sports style watches. It's just, as their US website side currently shows you, what is their most popular watch? It's the Tissot PRX. But Tissot actually has a lot of interesting collections. And Tissot, price wise, if you want Swiss made on the dial, and that matters to a lot of people, especially getting into it, like they'll be like, no, I don't want a watch from Japan. I want a watch that's from Switzerland. And we could get into all the nuance of, all right, well, just how Swiss made is your Swiss made watch and all of that. But the label matters to a lot of people, or they just want a different experience or whatever. So Tissot is usually the first Swiss brand that I end up recommending for a few reasons. Now, the PRX collection has gotten a lot of attention. You have 2 basic choice. I mean, you got multiple sizes and multiple dial colors and all of that, but you have 2 basic choices. You can either go quartz and spend around $400 US. But again, you can find these discounted new online. It's just, we're starting with a website, which is what we're doing. Or you can go up to about $900 and you can start exploring or 800 is more accurate, and start exploring those that are driven by the Powermatic 80. So if people want mechanical movement, there are plenty of options there, and they get all sorts of colorway choices and different sizes. We got the 40 millimeter sizes. They got the 35 millimeter size. You got different. I mean, if you want to, again, this says $1,050, but you probably can find this at this point under $1,000 through an authorized dealer. But you've got all sorts of different choices, PVD materials. They've played around a lot in this model line because this is the model line that has been working for Tissot sales wise. So a lot of us who are veteran watch collectors have gotten, in many instances, pretty tired of the PRX just because it feels like almost like the Moonswatch. They've iterated it on it so much, we feel suffocated. But they're doing it for a reason. They're still selling. It's still working. I actually, a couple months ago, was at a work function, and I saw a person sitting across from me. He had a PRX on. It was one of the quartz models. It wasn't the one I used to own. I used to own one. I used to own this. I had one on the bracelet, but I had this blue dial. So I had one of the more $400 ones. Now, it was sort of my first integrated sports watch, and I wanted to see how it wore. And it wore pretty good. Like, I used that I was wearing other watches over it, so I let it go. But it let me get that experience without having to invest a lot of money. But it's not just the PRX show over with Tissot. So another one that I really think, if you like more, I'm going to use elegant style, or again, that date just style, that go anywhere, do anything style of watch, the Tissot Gentleman is actually where I would tell beginners to start and look through this collection first, not the PRX. The PRX has got that very aggressive, sporty design to it to work with that integrated bracelet look. If you want a more traditional watch that would look good in a suit or casual, the Gentleman is a great place to start. So again, Powermatic maybe 80 movements or quartz movements. We're talking like $450-ish for the quartz. Mechanical is a little bit under the 900. Again, that's before any sort of discounting. But you see, you get a variety of colorways. Generally, more conservative watches, as the collection name would indicate. You can get them on bracelets. Some of them come on straps. Yes, there are some that get up in the price point because some of these actually have gold bezels and such. But there's plenty available under $1,000. And in terms of a Tissot watch to get, I think this is very competitive with the PRX. It definitely doesn't feel overdone like the PRX, but the design is more generic. So that, it is what it is. But beginners a lot of times will be drawn to the classics. And so this is a good place for them, I think, to start. And then, of course, I can't leave off a dive watch. Tissot does have dive watch options. I historically have not spent a lot of time looking into them. However, again, just like everything else, you notice where Tissot saves their money. They keep the casing pretty much the same in terms of sizing. These are, again, a lot of 40 millimeters, which are a great size in my opinion for dive watches. You could do quartz at around 500, and you can do Powermatic 80 mechanicals at around 800. And so you have, the more Rolex Submariner style looks. You have the more Pepsi style. I associate this blue-red approach more with Seiko, and everything in between. So you got dark, mostly more conservative colorways. If you want more fun colors, I think Orient's a better place to go in terms of dive watches. However, these have their own look. There's more, texturing to the dials on some of them and such. So I think it's a good place to play around. And if you're interested in a Swiss-made dive watch, you could do worse than Tissot. So anyway, so my number 2 brand for beginners that I like to point them to is Tissot. Okay, so let's see what you guys are saying. We've got Tuna saying the PRX is probably my least favorite Tissot. They do some great mechanical chronographs for the money. I would have shown those, but they were for the money, too much. I do not point beginners to mechanical chronographs, actually. Take a drink pause, apologies. I did have a mechanical Hamilton chronograph. It was not a good experience for me. I've whined about it plenty of times on the channel, but with discounting, and it was a shop-worn version of the watch, I was able to get it under 1,000. But mechanical chronographs under 1,000 are difficult. Seagull, of course, is an option, but I don't have experience with those, and I've heard mixed reactions about how well the chronographs hold up, that old technology. So for me, if you're into watches and you're into chronographs and you're new and you don't or you don't want to spend over $1,000, I really recommend quartz chronographs. I just think it's a safer space. It's easier to fix them if they go wrong, and the sizing isn't ridiculous, and especially if you want them to be functional and not just decorative. But that's just my quick take on it. But it's good to hear that they have some good mechanical chronographs, because I don't have a lot of mechanical chronograph experience. I've owned a whole 2 of them, and I only own 1 at this point. Tuna continues noting, I prefer the Gentleman more than the PRX. At this stage, I do as well. I would be more inclined if I was to get another Tissot. Well, I'd probably actually take a look at the chronographs first. But since I'm not a big time chronograph person, I probably ultimately would end up jumping into the Gentleman if I was to get another one. Tuna notes that the Valjoux 7750 is quite reliable. Yes, it's got a better reputation for sure than the Seagull movements, which is old Swiss technology as well. The Valjoux movement is very thick, though. It's especially in its automatic configuration, which is generally how you find it. Here's my recommendation: try one on first. Those are big boy watches. I mean, thick. I ain't ever owned anything thicker than something that was relying on a Valjoux 77.5 base. So don't just buy one. Is, I guess, my recommendation. Try it on first. I had a miserable wearing experience with a Hamilton that was using that as the H31 movement. That's based on one of the 77.5X movements. So just way, way, way too thick, in my judgment. But some people, again, will like that sort of thing. So it's one it's one of those where I wish I had tried it before I had bought it, but I had ordered it because it was what it was. So brand number 3, let's go back over to the Japanese manufacturers and let's talk about Citizen. So Citizen, very interesting brand in a lot of ways. Again, I mentioned my first sort of adult watch was a Citizen watch. So I always have had a fondness for them. I do have a Citizen still. It's not one that would be what I would recommend for a beginner, so I didn't wear it today. I actually wore that Citizen yesterday. But Citizen's playing in a variety of spaces I think are interesting. One, their quartz watches tend to be eco-drive watches. They were, I believe, the first solar-powered watch, and amongst solar-powered watches today, they remain my favorite. Like I think their solar technology is better executed than Casio's. I think it's significantly better executed than Seiko. And so if you want a solar powered watch, I almost always say, I don't care if you're a beginner or not, I almost say, look at Citizen first and then make some choices. Casios are perfectly good. So let me go ahead and note that. It's just with Casio, you tend to see the module and they just lean into that digital aesthetic, and that's good. Casio is not on my list, by the way. Probably the one I'll get dinged on the most was not including Casio, but because they don't have as many traditional looking watches, I just decided not to go ahead and include them in my list of 5. They'd have been on if I had expanded the list to 6. But a few collections to point out. One is it ain't all quartz. Citizen, especially in the US, is mostly known for quartz. But when the Seiko came out, this has resonated very well with a lot of people, and for obvious reasons. We've been talking about Datejust-esque watches. Again, you see this Datejust DNA. You actually have the Cyclops here at the 3 o'clock position for the date, which is very Datejust, but it's got its own look as well. Obviously, we've got the crown position being closer to the 4 o'clock is very atypical, almost turtle-esque. We were to pull something from Seiko, but the key thing here is threefold, really. One, it's mechanical. So, and for those that don't know, Citizen owns Miyota, so in-house mechanical movement. So again, a beginner wants in-house, like that's something they're interested in getting into with their collecting, this is a place to point them. 2, pricing. You see currently website-based pricing is around $350. Very approachable. You get a watch on a bracelet, robust watch style. And third, what I think Citizen has done very well here, maybe taking a page from Tissot's PRX line, is very, very diverse colorway options. So again, if you're a veteran collector and you're like, you know what, I want a yellow watch, but how often am I going to wear a yellow watch? I've actually thought about buying this watch because how often would I honestly wear a yellow watch? Probably not very often. I don't want to pay $3,000 for a watch I'm not going to wear very much. Would I pay $300 for a watch I'm not going to wear very much? Yes, I would. A beginner, that might still be a lot of money that they want to commit to a watch. Even for some collectors, $300 may be a lot. But again, you have that option. If this is like, you know what, $337.50 is really stretching my budget for what I want to buy for a watch, get a black one. Get one that you could wear all the time. Get your money's worth out of it. So they're playing in both sides of the stream here, and that's smart to do. You got Mickey versions. You've got, it's an integrated sports style watch, but it doesn't look like the PRX version. It feels more unique. It doesn't, because the PRX's design is evocative of other more expensive watches. But you have these, straps and stuff that you can configure with it, and they're not ridiculously priced. They're under $100. So you have small second versions if you want to spring, significantly more money, but we're still talking sub $600. So the Tsuyosa, I don't know if it's doing great for Citizen, but I know collectors have been praising it quite a bit. And given its pricing, I think it has been doing well. I just don't know versus like how we know the Moon Swatches did really well. We know the PRX has done really well. I think given we've seen more and more out of Citizen with this, it's working really well. And so I think it was an excellent way to really, to a lot of people, debut that they do have the capability to do mechanical watches. So I want to point that one out as a good beginner collection line to look at. But that's not the only thing. I mentioned EcoDrive at the start. Also titanium. Now, some of the Seikos I think might have titanium. Some of them are going to are stainless steel. However, Citizen Super Titanium is it's a fascinating approach with how they do the plating, how they do the alloy. It's very robust in terms of scratch resistance. I had a Oris titanium watch, and it was grade 2 titanium, scratch magnet, all the rest of it. I have a super titanium watch. My experience with that, I think I've got one little scratch on one side of one link on the watch. Even the clasp still looks good. It's really impressive material. Like it keeps its look really well, and that matters to a lot of people. What also matters to a lot of people is it's affordable. Citizen does not charge an arm and a leg for their titanium models. In fact, they readily offer you lots of titanium models. And here, the Zenshin collection, I think, is a good example of a line. I wasn't particularly familiar with this line. However, aesthetically, I think this is a good place to steer beginners. We're talking EcoDrive, so it's quartz watches. However, they're solar charged, so no battery swaps to worry about. Fairly conservative looks on some of them, yes. But the case shape is pretty interesting, I think. So it feels playful, but while still being sort of dressed down in a way. That might not be the right expression, but that's kind of what I'm running with. But we have some unique ones, like interesting placed subdials here and such. But again, whole slew of these under $500. where I first saw the Zenshins are their chronographs, which I really like the look of these with how they've textured them and stuff. So again, I'm not in the market for a new chronograph, but so you have a solar powered charging chronograph. It's not going to be overly thick. These are 42.5 millimeters in diameter. I wonder what the thickness is if they've listed it on their website. They might not. Some of these brands don't like to list the thickness. Well, about 100 meters water resistance, all that. So again, I think this is a really good place to steer people. And if they want a lightweight watch, pointing them to titanium is actually, especially if they still want a bracelet, because titanium watches are very, very light. Some people don't like that, so it's definitely not for everyone. But this, I think, is a really good collection with an interesting bracelet design. And you have quite, it's not a huge collection, but there are some nice models to choose from, and they're very affordable. So I would say this is a good place for a beginner if they're interested in quartz or solar quartz or titanium. And then third area I wanted to point out, because dive watches are so popular, is the ProMaster line. I've never owned a Citizen ProMaster myself. However, again, we're talking a lot of instances of eco drive technology. So we're keeping the price down because it's quartz, but it's solar charged. So you don't have to worry about taking the case back off and doing battery swaps or going to a watchmaker to do it. You can get chronograph versions. You can get just more traditional dress watch versions. Citizen's dive watches have reviewed very well from other collectors, from what I have read. You have a lot of different case configurations. You've got Annie-Digi stuff going on here. And again, I don't know if any of them on this page were over $1,000 when I looked earlier. I don't remember seeing any. And some of them get very complex. So you can go like full on Breitling complexity if you want to, or you can go ahead and get something much more toned down as more traditional style dive watch. You've got titanium options. You've got there's just a lot here that you can choose from, including, as you see, as I've scrolled down more, that's not all eco drive. They have automatics as well, and they kept those prices under $1,000 also. So for my third brand, I think Citizen is an excellent place to steer beginners. Lots of Citizen shops available, US and elsewhere. So it's very easy to be able to try on the watches. And they just have a lot of diversity. And now that they've leaned more and more into offering mechanical, I think the one thing that was always holding me back from recommending Citizen is it was a brand where I didn't feel comfortable pointing you unless I knew you were okay with quartz. But now it's either or. You can go in and you can choose a lot of choices, a lot of things, a lot of different configurations. And I don't think it may be a little bold. I don't think so, though, to say that. I think Citizen has the best titanium in the game against luxury too. Tudor's titanium. I mentioned my experience with Oris. Like you can talk grade 2, grade 5 all day, every day. Super titanium is very impressive, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money given the price point that Citizen engages with. But they just know the material really well, and it basically gives people everything they want. Their platings, their Duratec coatings, they can make it look like platinum. They can make it look like gold. They can make it shiny, so it's not that dark gray that we see with grade 2 titanium. It's just don't underestimate it. If you're interested in titanium, don't write Citizen off. I'd actually say start there, and then just really think if you want, if you want a luxury watch, great, that no problem. But don't think that their titanium is going to be better just because you paid $10,000. So I'm just going to leave that there. So. All right. What we got in terms of chat, live stream chat? Danters, welcome to the live stream, by the way. Don't think I greeted you yet. I was waiting for Citizen. This was my first watch I got as an adult. I had an Eco Drive and would wear it every day until my house got robbed and someone stole it. Kind of miss those days when I was happy with just one $200 watch. Well, I'm sorry to hear about the robbery. Actually, let me share that story as well. So in 2019, I had a break-in. That was before I was collecting watches. So I had been for, over a decade wearing my Rolex Explorer 2 that I bought used, my 5-digit reference, which I still have. So that was on my wrist that day. I had, I mentioned it earlier in the stream, I was given from my parents a Citizen, not an Eco Drive, but it was a quartz chronograph on bracelet in the 90s when I was in high school. So that was my first adult watch, and I can't find it. I assume it was stolen when the burglary happened. They mostly stole electronics, but my room was in disarray, my bedroom, which is where I'm recording this. And I have up here on this is my computer shelf. Up here, I have a little baggie with the links that were taken out for the watch to be sized to my wrist. But I don't know where the watch is. reason why I have to hedge as to whether it was stolen or not is I don't remember where I had the watch. Like, I don't remember at all. I had another watch that was water damaged. There was this little cheap throwaway watch that I had for when I went to Alaska, and I'd still had it. It was still here. It wasn't taken, and I threw it away afterwards because I'm like, wait a moment, that watch is broke. I don't need to keep that watch. I think it was a relic watch, I think was the name of it. But the Citizen watch, I have no idea. So I may have very well just misplaced it because I hadn't worn it in 15 years. I wish I knew if I had it. I wish I knew where it was because I changed the battery myself and wear it now. But I don't know where it is anymore. So anyway, but that was it was just one of those things. So the biggest pain with that burglary was having to get the window replaced that they threw a brick through. That took a while because I'd order it from Pella, and then it came unstained. I had to find a stain and stain the window myself and install it. This is like yes, very violating, I guess is the way to describe that. But yeah, they stole a bunch of electronics, stole a gun case. The guns were locked up in the gun case, but that was mostly the valuable stuff that they got. I rent a room out. They robbed that room too of electronics. My quarters, I had a piggy bank thing of quarters that they were all spilled down the stairs. I don't think they stayed in the house very long. Didn't steal any pinball machines. It's kind of difficult to steal a pinball machine. So that was the room they breached. So had to vacuum up glass off of them from the window shatter. But anyway, we're not here to talk about post burglary cleanup stuff. But yes, that was not a fun time. Marcelo, hello. Hope things are going well for you. Tuna says, in the cheaper field, Citizen have certainly upped their game compared to Seiko. Because Marcelo asks the question, though I see Tuna's comment came in first. Citizen versus Seiko, what would you recommend? Well, that it depends on a few factors. Personally, I think you get more bang for the buck out of Citizen. That being said, I have owned more Seikos, and there's a lot of diversity in design that you can find in Seiko. A lot of different dial choices and stuff. Plus, I feel like there's more variety in the case shape. I'm not sure that's quite true, but I feel that's how I feel. So, yeah, I usually, if you say mechanical, I have my bias is my bias, and I still tend to point you to Seiko over Citizen. But if you're just like, if we're talking watches more, I tend to end up finding people slot better into Citizen, in my opinion. But of course, that's an outsider trying to provide a perspective to someone who you don't fully know what they want in watches. So that's why you pick their brain and try and get at them and point them in a place where they'll be happy and not feel like they made a huge mistake. Only after they start buying, watch number 6 do they realize they've made a huge mistake, no matter what they did. But that's just the way of collecting. Tuna says, a present from your parents. That is always a shame, Dennis. Yeah, I mean, the fact, the burger, I was like, okay, I'll get an alarm set up and all of that after that. I just never really thought about it before. Yeah, I mean, it was just the frustration of it. I'm not super nostalgic, so that was, yeah, it's unfortunate. Assuming, again, I can't tell you the watch is truly stolen. I honestly might have it under the stairs in a storage container from when I moved from a townhouse. I don't know. So I can't feel like I knew certain things that were stolen. They stole my Xbox. That thing I knew. They stole Halo. They went. I had a collection of video games. They left the bad games and they took like the popular ones like Halo. And I think they stole one other video game. All the other ones they just threw on the floor. They're like, they don't want those Japanese role-playing games. They want shooters. It's like, maybe those are what sell on the black video game market. I don't know. What I do know is that it's time for us to jump to watch brand number 4, which is not going to be Seiko. We're going to end with Seiko. We're going to do Hamilton instead for number 5. So Scotty Pinball say, was Tony a suspect who's been on the channel before, who I do the Eclectic Gamers podcast with? No, Tony looks down upon console gaming. He is a PC gamer. And so if he had taken my Xbox, it would have solely been to light it on fire in the middle of my living room so that I would have to switch back to gaming on PC like I used to do. But all right, so Hamilton. All right. This is their default. Again, links to all the brand. They're not affiliate links. I don't have affiliate links. Links to all the brands if you want to check them out. But all right, Hamilton. The watch choice of movie makers, right? this is my other Swiss brand beside Tissot that I would point people to. The problem with Hamilton is with my parameters of $1,000 or less list, you can find Hamiltons readily available for less. So I kind of want to talk about them. However, your choices are a lot more limited when you start pointing beginners to the website. So I have to be a little bit cautious here. So the khaki field collection, though, is why this comes to mind. So there are other brands that offer the field watch aesthetic, but none is as iconic as Hamilton. And so I like to point here because we're talking mechanical, variety of colors, variety of sizes, variety of strap options, and most of these choices are under $1,000. So you can see here, we've got a variety of things. We've got the regular kind of, I think of it like allied look field watch with date complications. You've got the cathedral style, which kind of reminds me of the Seiko Alpinist, which is their version of field watch. You've got, quartz versions. You've got a lot of Powermatic 80 driven versions. I believe they're using the Powermatic 80. You've got bronzes, you've got stainless steels, you've got NATO straps, you've got bracelets, you've got leather. Yes, you start getting into some here. You can see where you start getting up over $1,000 MSRP. However, there are plenty of options available that are less. And then once you have that discussion with someone, a lot of times, if it's a beginner in particular, they can say, hey, Dennis, I saw this khaki field titanium auto for $1,245. And I really want, I like the look of that, but I don't want to pay over $900. And you can start saying, okay, well, first, don't buy it from their website. Let's point you to some authorized dealer websites or go to a shop and see if you've got a Hamilton dealer, and you might be able to get it down closer to where you want it at. Or if they're really, really committed, like they found the model that they really want, you can start having a conversation about, okay, well, how comfortable would you be buying used? And those sort of, and have a discussion about that. So Hamilton, I do think with field watching, it's just, they're again, so readily available. I wouldn't steer a beginner to Marathon, even though I think Marathon makes a really good field watch, just because it's a little like, if you want to try it on, if you want to be able to take it back to the store if there's an issue, just Hamilton's going to be a safer bet. And I mean, they're really nice looking watches. It's not just field watches though. That's always what jumps to my mind first. So if you're into a field watch as a beginner, I point you to Hamilton first and foremost. That's just my gut reaction. Again, we've talked dive watches a lot today with every single brand so far because they are the most popular model. So Hamilton does have a number of them that they're going to be close to $1,000 to start with. And there are lots that are over $1,000 in this list. You can start seeing, especially if you go bracelet. However, they do offer a number of automatic driven watches in their scuba, their khaki navy scuba watches. So that you can find even on bracelet, you can see here just under $900. But it is an option. I hear less about the dive watches from Hamilton. I've not handled one, so I'm not going to recommend it. I'm just pointing out it is a collection that a beginner might be interested in because there are a number of models that are available under that $1,000 MSRP price point. So that's an option as well. And then under their American Classic collection, I so wanted to include the Ventura, but most of the Venturas are over $1,000. I couldn't do it. You can see there are some very for Hamilton pricing, very higher priced models here under the Classic collection. But if they want some of the more historic, vintage looking watches, there are some very interesting choices here. I've not given you a good example yet of a rectangular kind of tank-esque watch to choose from. Seiko does have a few, and we are going to end with Seiko. But Hamilton has some that I think have some very interesting dial configurations if you like that more Roman numeral approach, but doesn't look like how Cartier does their Roman numerals. So that's definitely an option around that $500 to $600 price point. There are also the digital quartzes, that are under $1,000. So again, you're seeing one example here, but there are multiple variations that are in each of these buckets. So there are other looks where, all right, yeah, so the gold one's over $1,000. But again, $1,095, you'll probably be able to find these at less than what is listed here. But there are some that even retail under that amount. So that's a good choice too if they want something really funky looking. I mean, this is a really iconic looking style watch. So that would be a space you can go in and play in. And again, I showed one here, 41 millimeter by 30 by 31 or whatever, the classic versions, $800. You can get one of those. So there are a few choices here that I think are worth exploring. So If you like that classic look, like 50s on up to 70s, definitely point people in this direction. A lot of them might very well be outside of the price point, but there are some pretty creative designs here. So I would say it's worth looking at. And again, some of these I think on negotiation with a dealer, you could get them under the 1,000. They're just barely above in many cases. So anyway, Hamilton's number 4. They were the one I was, even though I covered them 4th, that I was most skeptical about doing today because so many of their watches are retailing over 1,000 at this point. But there's no more iconic name in the game on the field watch side, and it is a watch style that a lot of beginners might really be into, and like they're just people who are really into field watches. And with a beginner, you don't necessarily know unless they've already defined what their tastes are. That might be the rabbit hole they want to go down. And I think Hamilton's a really good place to start. And it's actually a good place where you can really expand into a lot of different styles within those field watches. So I'm not a field watch person. I had one, I had a Marathon, and I had a Hamilton khaki aviation style watch was my Hamilton, but field watches I just don't wear. So not my personal taste. But again, with a beginner, we're trying to get them where they want to go. So I wanted to go ahead and throw that one out. I think it's a good brand to go ahead and explore. And again, much like Tissot, if they care about Swiss made on the dial, and a lot of people do, Hamilton is a route that is worth exploring. You're still in the Swatch group, but there aren't really a lot of non-Swatch group places I would point a beginner to get Swiss made. Again, once they get more experience under their belt, micro brands can be a place. I don't start beginners at micro brands, though. I think it's too risky for a variety of reasons. Marcelo, let me get caught up with chat, and then we will go into Seiko, which is the final brand that I want to talk about. Seiko Diverse used to be very good prices. Now they are actually nearly triple the prices. I still think Seiko has some things that are compelling enough that I want to include them, but it has gotten harder to talk Seiko with people, with beginners, and with affordability, definitely. I see Seiko Crown from Patrick with Pocket Watch Time. Maybe that means King Seiko. King Seikos will not be on the list. They are overpriced for what they are. I do like the looks ever so much. I keep waiting to find one fall low enough in price, and I might actually add a third Seiko into the collection, breaking my rule of only 2 of a brand at a time. But we'll have to wait and see on that. Scotty says, my newest watch is the Khaki Expedition, and it gets a lot of wrist time. Excellent. I've heard very interesting things about a variety of the Khaki models. I've considered trying again with a Khaki, not an aviation style, but again, I have to weigh if I really would wear it very much, and I just don't think I would. So I still don't pull the trigger on it. Tuna says, I have a Jazzmaster thin line and an Intramatic. Both are two-handers, but the quality is great for what they are. I almost put the Jazzmaster collection in my list of examples. There weren't enough that were in the price range. So I just didn't feel like I could, in good faith, show it as an example. Marcelo asks, could you get a Hamilton used? And if so, would you recommend it? I'm a big fan of buying used watches. Most of my watches that I've bought used have been luxury watches, and I define that very loosely as over $1,000, but it's an excellent place to save money. The movements are so robust and easy to find service for that I wouldn't be afraid of it. I have heard a number of people have had QC issues with Hamilton movements. That's often the case for any more affordable watch, but getting a new Powermatic 80 or whatever they're driven by is not a big deal. So, could you get them used? Yes. Dealers aren't going to sell them by and large because there's not enough profit to be made. Look on eBay, look on Chrono24. I'm comfortable buying on Chrono24 because you can use their escrow service and you'll get the watch and you can before the escrow is released. So you have a decent amount of protection. And honestly, as a buyer, eBay is so pro buyer over pro seller. I wouldn't be, especially sub $1,000, I wouldn't be worked up about it. These aren't watches that I'm overly concerned about clones of because they're already pretty affordable watches. So would I recommend it? Yes, I would. For a beginner, I just think when people ask me for watch buying advice, I don't like to spend a lot of time trying to comfort them that they're not going to get screwed. So I usually point them to dealers, and the price differentials are, if it's just a couple $100. I mean, I tend to, on luxury watches, I've never bought a private seller. I'll pay a few $100s more and I'll buy from a third party dealer who inspected the watch. That's enough to satisfy my comfort level. I'll take some scratches. That's okay too. But I'd rather save thousands than buy new. But obviously the dollar game is at that in the luxury space. I mean, when we're talking thousands, it's, I mean, you can look and you can say, I mean, you know, full, I'm not an idiot. I know I have some very expensive watches. I don't buy those retail for a reason because they're already super expensive, and thousands of dollars means something to me. I change my own oil. I mow my own lawn. I cheap out on all sorts of things, and I don't like paying list. So yes, I'm a big fan of saving money where you can, as long as you've not sacrificed too much of whatever you're after. And comfort that you're getting a quality product is a worry. For things like Seikos and stuff, I tend to just go ahead and get them at a discount new rather than save a little bit more and buy used. But I'm totally cool with it. Donter says, when I got back into watches 10 years after my Citizen was stolen, I almost bought the Hamilton Field watch. I ended up going with a Zen 500. Well, I think I should just call it the 556i, which is about $1,000 at the time, thanks to Urban Gentry. Zen is not a brand I've ever owned. Most of their designs I haven't liked historically. However, that's more like just like the weird, funky ones, like Patrick with Pocket Watch Time, like the ones with the Lego hands, the stuff he likes. That's too weird for me. I need more boring Zens, but I've never owned one. Used to be a very, very good buy. I would say Zen at this point is probably a very fair purchase. Kind of like Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko used to be this bargain in luxury space. It's not a bargain anymore. You might be able to argue it's a very fair price compared to some of their competition, but it's not a bargain anymore. I think Zen's kind of in that boat. Patrick says, the Zen 556 is a great watch. Thumbs up. Donter says, yeah, the Zen was my only watch for about 2 years, but went down the YouTube rabbit hole and had to start building a collection. Now it's one of my lower risk time watches. Yeah, I still have some low risk time watches that I really like that I don't plan to get rid of. But wearability and wear frequency do mean a lot to me. I'm more of an enthusiast than a collector in that regard. Underachieving says, I recommend Invicta to my frenemies. I've never owned an Invicta. Invicta is one of those, I mentioned, I think, on the last live stream, that it's like Ulysse Nardon. I stereotype it or pigeonhole it as a large wrist watch. And at 6.75 inches of wrist diameter, my wrist is not large. And so I just assume I can't wear an Invicta. The Invicta would wear me. Donter says, but mostly because I don't wear a lot of black. Medgas Guy says, hi, Dennis and chat. I have the Hamilton Pilot Pioneer hand wound, which I dig very much. Okay, I had an automatic, which I did not dig, but it was a khaki Pilot, not the Pilot Pioneer. Pilot Pioneer has a good aesthetic, though. Dios Banano says, unless you want a cocktail time, you have to spend $1,000 US to get a really nice Seiko now, with a few exceptions. Well, let's go into that, because Seiko is my number 5. And of course, nice is going to be flexible, debatable, controversial. And again, we're not talking used, and we're basing it off of the retail price. So I'm at the Seiko USA. So again, link to all the brands is in the video description. Some of those are going to be the US links because those are the ones I used. So, you know, Google is your friend if you need a different link. They're not affiliate links, though. So Seiko. Seiko used to be the go-to, I think, for a lot of people. And now Seiko, as many of you in chat have noted, it's a lot more controversial and difficult now because Seiko has been marching up market. They so desperately want to do it. And logically, it makes sense to me. They're not in a great position in the sense that smartwatches have stepped in to where a lot of their pricing has been on some of their watches. And so they're wanting to appeal to collectors, and they try, and I think they do. I think they've played that game better than Citizen has. I think Citizen's trying to play that game now, and the decisions that Citizen is making have actually been very smart ones. But Seiko has for quite a while learned to rely on the enthusiast quite a bit. But you start seeing, I mean, it's just Seiko has not got everything firing on all cylinders for them. And so again, including when talking to a beginner, want to give them certain, figure out what they're comfortable with. Are you okay with bezels and chapter rings being slightly misaligned? If not, you might want to steer clear of Seiko, or you might want to make sure you buy the Seiko in person and not order it online. And that may be a barrier or an obstacle or a frustration that they don't want to address. Do you really want an accurate movement? Their quartz movements are great. Mechanically, even the 6R movements are shockingly broad in their spectrum. Now, Citizen has a pretty good reputation of being tighter within tolerance than their subsidiary Orient is. But nonetheless, on paper, a Seiko 4R movement got a worse spec than an Orient. I forget what the Orient baseline movement they tend to use is, but it's interesting. It's even when you move up, I think, into the 8Rs, you're like, why is this not like Kosk? Like, why is this still a little broader range than anything else? So Seiko definitely has some things working against them. But what Seiko has working in favor is, despite the King Seikos, the 8R movements or 8Ls or whatever the 8 series movements are that you see the articles about all the time, and they're super ultra limited editions that they're dropping, they still, one, have a number of watches under $1,000. Two, have a lot of name recognition. Three, have a big variety of model lines still at under $1,000. And four, have a massive selection within all of these collections, or most of these collections. And so there's just a lot. It's kind of like Hamilton and Field watches. There's a lot of choice within Seiko, more choice in the active SKU lineup than any other brand I think we've talked about today. And that can be advantageous in terms of finding what you want. It can also result in analysis paralysis, which, again, for a lot of people on this live chat and watching this video, unless you've found it trying to figure out how you want to start collecting, we as collectors and enthusiasts, these are the questions that we then end up like trying to help people sift through their analysis paralysis. So, okay. So when a beginner comes to me and they say they want mechanical, if we're talking quartz, I generally don't steer them to Seiko, but Seiko does have some nice quartz watches. It's just not where I start with. If they want in-house mechanical, though, Seiko is often one of the early ones I think of, especially if they're not insisting they want Swiss made. So the Seiko 5 Sports option is still like the go-to for beginners. And again, it's not just for beginners, but it's not a whole lot of specs you have to explain. They're very wearable watches. You have, useful complications because the Seiko 5 line is going to be day date. That's part of the 5 setup. So you're going to have time plus day date options in a variety of colorways, in a variety of configurations. So you can see here, a lot of these list prices are around that $400 price point. You even have 5s that are going to be more complex, do things like dive watches and stuff in the 5 series, but the pricing still remains tight. You still see automatic. They're going to be automatic movement watches. You got them on bracelets. You have them on NATOs. You have 4 o'clock crown positions. You have 3 o'clock crown positions. You've got different case configurations even within this. But the pricing, while not what it was, while not SKX style, we're just not in that era anymore. You can get those looks. You can get those bright colors. You can get those conservative looking watches. You can get relatively dressy looking watches within the Seiko 5 collection. And the pricing is still such that I think it's viable. Also, these watches tend to be driven by the 4R movements. The accuracy of the 4R movement is not great. The robustness of the 4R movement is pretty good. A number of people who watch this channel regularly, when Seiko has come up, if a 6R is in the discussion, they'll often point out that there are issues and concerns with the 6R movement. It's just one of those things we as collectors start to hear about, just like we hear about that the Sellita SW200 is not kind to constantly being hand wound, specifically the 200, and the Miyota 9000 series movements are way better, more robust than the Miyota 8000s. Like, they're just certain things that we start to hear about. The Seiko 4R, though, is what's in these Seiko 5s. I don't know if they put any 6Rs in the 5s. The 5s are, in all instances I can remember, got some form of a 4R, and it is a pretty solid movement. It's not an impressive movement in any way, but it is a solid movement. And so I think the Seiko 5 line is, as long as you're into the look, and there's certain design choices that are in that series that you may not like. But as you can see from my scrolling here, there are a lot of different looks to these dials, these handsets, the colorways, and even the crown configurations. So there's a lot here. And just having a lot here can tell a beginner, here's a place you can go and play in. There's lots of Seikos that you can go and experience in hand. So there's just like, you can get overwhelmed just by Seiko, which could be bad, but it also gives a beginner a place to start without getting overwhelmed by brands. Then there's the Prospex. Now, I used to have a Seiko Prospex with a 4R movement. It was a King Turtle, and even its retail price was under $1,000. Now, again, a few years ago, we would have gotten a lot. We gotten those specs for significantly less money, but this is still within range, I think, to be worth entertaining. And this is the Prospex line is much more designed for people that want to use the watch out in the world. So the Seiko Sports 5 is more, think of that as the more aesthetic. This is more about aesthetics. If you're like, oh no, I really want to swim with the watch, for example, Prospex is a good place to look at. You've got turtles. You've got more traditional looking dive chronographs. You've got more traditional looking dive watches. Depending on what you want, would I send you to the Prospex line? It depends. Like if you were like, I'd like a red dive watch with a 3 o'clock crown, I'd probably tell you, you know what, go back over to Orient and get a Kamasu. Like, I just think that'd be a better bet for you. But, if you want a turtle style watch like this SR PK43, I mean, it's a design language that I feel very specific to Seiko. And there are other turtles out there. It's turtle-esque cushion case styles out there, but the turtle is the turtle. And I think, I think it's a good play. This is the one I had actually it said 750. You could, again, this is where I'm based it off of the list price on the website. You could find them from people new, like around $500 on eBay. So you don't have to pay what's on the website, but there's a lot of choices, and these have more robust stats. And you see on the pricing, we're using 4R movements to keep the pricing controlled on many of these models. So I think it's a good place for beginners to look at who want a more serious professional style watch. And then I want to go ahead and mention the Presage. So if you want a dressy-esque watch, and let's say you don't like the Bambinos and stuff from Orient, or you like this style of look, again, we've got options here, GMT style watches, mechanical still in play, pretty elegant looking. You can get them on bracelets, you can get them on straps. Pricing, it's still, a lot of this floats around the $500 price point. So new MSRP, I should say. So again, before discount and stuff. So it's a decent looking watch. No, it's not going to run the best. Again, we know what movements are going to be powering these things at the price points that they are in. However, they are aesthetically attractive, and I do think competitively priced. I mean, a lot of micro brands are going to be around these prices too. So it's not like you're going to save a lot sending them somewhere else. And it is a brand where if something goes wrong, going and having it serviced or taking it back to the store is not a big deal. So I think Seiko 5 Sport, Prospex, and Presage are the three collections that I would point people to if I think that Seiko is where they as a beginner need to start with. But again, it depends on a lot of factors. I don't instinctively start people at Seiko for a bunch of the reasons we've already discussed, like the price creep, not wanting to send them to used where they could avoid a lot of that, the analysis paralysis, and the misalignments, that their movements are definitely not any more accurate than any of the other brands we've been talking about. So I don't instinctively just go, oh, you want to get into watch collection, get a Seiko. And I think 10 years ago, a lot of people would have said that. But I do think they do deserve to be in the list with Orient, Tissot, Citizen, and Hamilton. So those are my 5, and I will get caught up on chat. Obviously, Casio was my glaring leave out that if I were to have displaced one, it would have been Hamilton. I really wanted to not just have 4 Japanese brands, though. I wanted a little more diversity on that, and I thought Hamilton had some interesting looks. And Casio, it's such an interesting boat because I'm a big fan of having people own a Casio because obviously G-Shocks are great, but they've got stuff beyond the G-Shocks. But they lean so digital. I felt more comfortable going with brands that offer a lot more in the way of analog time telling. But definitely an honorable mention would be Casio for beginners. Swatch Group has a few other brands you could play in potentially. Rado a little bit has some stuff within the range that you can explore. You could talk about swatches, just like regular swatch watches. They're a little more fun, easy to damage, easy to scratch. That again, they were always designed to be a second watch. I don't really ever think to point beginners to them, but pricing they're there. And of course, there's a lot of affordable watches that we could go into because then micro brands bring a whole bunch of stuff to the table. But obviously was trying to steer clear of that because I don't believe micro branding is where you send a beginner to get started in watch collection. That's like once they're ready for their third or fourth watch, I think that's when we finally can start saying, all right, do you want to learn more? Do you want to know more? Do you want to see how deep the rabbit hole goes? Do you want to take the red pill? Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. But let me go ahead and get caught up with chat. Let's see. Tuna says, sadly, Seiko with the price hikes and poor quality control have fallen off their perch. One could go Tissot, Hamilton, and many other routes. Yes, absolutely. But I'm still including them in the list. I think they've got enough diversity there to be worth having the conversation about. Underachiever says, I have had horrible experiences with low-end Seiko mechanical watches, which again, it's where I've seen others, and I will say it too, especially on the very affordable stuff. If you live near a place that sells Seiko, it might be worth not getting as much of a discount buying online and making sure you found one where everything aligns the way you want it, and just visually inspect it yourself. Patrick says, you can buy really cool neo vintage Seikos for less than $1,000. That's the best value for Seiko. I agree. However, for beginners, I can't point them to neo vintage and navigating the used market. I think it's too overwhelming. They have to decide they're going to want to sink their teeth in, and then I think it's okay to go that route. But I think it's too scary to start with. Rob says, bought my son's Prospex divers, great starter watches. Yeah, my experience with the Prospex was, I really liked my Seiko Prospex. I got rid of it because I didn't wear it enough. And as we talked about earlier, I just don't wear a lot of dive watches. So I'm down to the one dive watch in the collection because I just don't wear them. But it wore really well. Those turtle shapes. Mine was a turtle. Rare. I really like that case shape. Maybe in a non-dive cushion. I might look into more non-dive cushions for me. Adam says a Swiss luxury beginner's video would be good for $1,000 to $3,000, or a luxury mechanical in general at that price range. I didn't know if there was demand at that price point or not. I'll think about doing that one. There's a lot there that you can really explore if we were to MSRP ourselves at $1,000 to $3,000. Less than you might think. Stuff's frustratingly moved up in that range as well. But there are some interesting choices there. Like where would people want to go if they want to kind of get into what I call luxury? Because to me, that's luxury once we cross that threshold. A lot of people call that range entry level luxury. A lot of people call entry level luxury like 1,000 to 5 or 1 to 8. But you start getting so broad, there's a big difference for someone when you say, are you willing to spend $1,000? Are you willing to spend $5,000? That's 5 times more than what we were just talking about. Are you kidding me? So I'll think about that one. I don't know. I guess people who are watching can leave a comment if they would like me to do something more in that price range. Definitely is. I have ideas on ones I could do there. I just don't want to make it so high up that I price myself out of having anyone be interested in the topic. Because we could do that. Like, what are the best watches for $100,000 that I'm never going to own? I could probably give you a good list. I don't know. I haven't owned any of them, so it'd be questionable about how much I could really say on it. Tuna says, apparently Casio now have a mechanical edifice. Yeah, I didn't know if the news on that is out yet. I'd heard they've been working on a mechanical movement and that we were supposed to know more this summer. So I look forward to seeing what it is because I'm curious. It'll be curious to know if they've tested it enough or if they're going to have movement issues like so many brands have when they've rolled something out too soon. I'm looking at you, Tudor, when you did that with your date complication on your in-house movements. They got it figured out, but took them a little bit. But what I figured out is we are at the end of this live stream. Thank you, everyone who was able to tune in live. If you haven't, go ahead and comment on your thoughts on where you would send beginners for a watch when they want to get into watch collecting, because I think it's good to have lists like that. Obviously, you don't have to play by the same parameters as I did, but at the start of the video, I have defined how I set my conditions to choose my 5. Again, my links in the video description to all of the brands that I talked about are there. So if you want to explore those watches, if you are a beginner and you were curious, or you're just someone who wants to look into those brands, you can just click on those and, figure it out, navigate those sites. But other than that, I will plan to be back next Saturday with a new topic. And until then, I hope you all have a really good weekend. Take care, everybody.